Hi, GCSE historians. Today we are going to be thinking about how we answer an exam question. And to start off with, we're going to start off all our exam question videos in this way. We're going to think about this wheel of historical thinking. I'm going to call it a wheel of historical thinking. And it represents all the things that, or all the different ways in which historians think about the past. So, the first key thing we want to point out is that history is what we do. We know that history isn't just about a random collection of facts about the past, history is a verb. Historians create and construct histories. And in the process of creating these histories, there's different ways that historians think about the past. And these ways in which historians think about the past are called historical concepts. So, we are going to be focusing on the historical concept of significance for today. And all of these concepts have, clearly defined definitions. But in order to simplify it effectively, significance is just asking, so what? Significance is asking, why do we care about this thing that happened in the past? Why do historians care about certain developments that happened in the past and not others? We know that history isn't just a carbon copy of everything that happens in the past. History is a selection, and that selection ultimately is what significance is about. It's about why historians select certain things that happened in the past and not others. So we're going to be focusing on significance. And you'll notice here that I have a brick wall here because we know that for all of these ways of thinking, for all of these conceptual, these concepts, sources are the foundation of doing history. All of our concepts are linked to our use of sources for evidence. So let's think about significance, our so what concept. So significance is a decision that historians make about what is important from the past. We can't just study everything that happened. We need to make a decision about what is important from the past. So when we think about significance, we can think about a significant change, a significant development, a significant event, a significant issue, or a significant person. That's how we think about the past. We think about different people, issues, developments, changes that happened in the past that we think as historians are worthy of study, are worthy of writing about, are worthy of presenting to our audience. So we're going to start here in terms of how we're going to think about significance, and this diagram sets it out for us. So we have a date or a development or an issue or a person that we want to think about their significance of. So there are different ways in which we can think about significance. Firstly, does the person or event shine a light on a bigger issue in the past? So do they give us an insight into the pattern of migration? Do they give us an insight into the development of the British Empire? Do they give us an insight into how religion was often motivated migration patterns? We can also think about significance in terms of, well, how deeply did this person or did this issue affect other people? So, for example, something in the past might be significant, worthy of writing about, but did it really affect that many people? And so we can kind of have a debate about how significant something really was, depending on how deeply we think people were affected. We can also think about how far that development or that person or that issue led to change. Okay, the more significant an event is, it can be determined or analyzed by the amount of impact it had, the amount of change that this event or this development led to. Another way we think about significance is how far people have remembered it. So, is it something that kind of dominates in sort of our public historical memory? Is it something that people always go back to? Is it something that people are still talking about now? So, for example, we always remember at the end of January, it's Holocaust Memorial Day. It's something that is remembered. Now, the Holocaust isn't significant just because we have remembered it, but that's one of the reasons why it's significant, because we continue to remember this really, really tragic event that happened in the past. Another way of thinking about significance is, have people commented on it at the time? Did people talk about it? Did people comment about it? Was it something that was, the talk of the town of the day, was it the word on the street at the time? Was it commented on? And so once we've kind of thought about an event, a development, a change, or an issue or a person in these ways, we then kind of form an opinion on the significance of something. We decide, yeah, this is actually really important because it led to this significant change, or this was really significant because it deeply affected so many people at the time, or this is really significant because it shines a light on a bigger issue that kind of runs through time. So we can think about significance in different ways. But in order to simplify that and to help us remember these kind of questions that we need to ask about events and people and developments in the past, we have the 4 R's. Now, the 4 R's are really helpful because they help us to remember the questions we need to ask about the event or the person, and it gives us a clear criteria from which to judge significance from. So we've got remarkable. Did people at the time of the event, so when this thing happened in the past, were people talking about it? Was it remarked upon? So it's not like, oh my gosh, that's remarkable, although it would have been remarkable in that way. But we also need to think about it in terms of, did people therefore remark upon it because it was so astonishing what happened? Did it result in change? And what kind of changes did it actually lead to? Has it been remembered? Has it been important to people in another period? So is there something that happened 100 years ago that in the 1950s people picked up on and thought this was really important to remember? And is it revealing? Does it highlight a bigger issue about, or a bigger concept from the past? So when we think about significance, we need to remember our 4 R's, but we also want to think about how we're going to categorize our significant developments or significant person in terms of their short-term significance. So how significant were they at the time? And then the long-term significance. So for the purpose of this question, we're going to classify short-term significance on things that are remarkable about this development or this person or this event. And then we're going to think about the long-term significance of these historical events. Because what is really interesting about significance, and I think this is what is so fascinating about history, is that history is dynamic. It doesn't just stay the same. So what one historian or a group of historians might classify as significant in 2020, in another generation or in another different group of historians might actually rewrite that history and think, no, actually, it's not as significant as people have made out. And so history is constantly being rewritten. Different histories are always being written. We always have new histories of the same event coming out all the time because historians always find new ways to think about that event in the past. So short-term significance and long-term significance. So this is what the significance question looks like on the paper. Explain the significance of, and after those 3 dots, you would get a person, an event, a development, and your job is to explain why that person or that development or that event is historically significant. And this question is worth 8 marks. So you should be spending at least 12 minutes in exam conditions trying to answer this question. So let's think about how we structure the answer. You need to write at least 2 separate paragraphs for this answer. One paragraph should explain the short-term significance of the event or the person or whatever is named in the question, and then another paragraph explaining the long-term significance of the person or the event named in the question. So, how do you structure each paragraph? You should all be so clear about how you structure your answers in history now. But just as a recap, it's the AEEJ paragraph structure that we need to use for every single answer in history. Okay, so just to kind of bring this to life to help us really understand what we're trying to do as we construct this paragraph, I've used some hopefully humorous GIFs to kind of illustrate what you're trying to do for each element in the AEEJ paragraph structure. So the first is our argument, and the argument is entirely something that you are going to construct that actually addresses the question. So you're answering the question with the argument. You are showing that you have thought about the question and you're answering it in one clear sentence. Then you're making a stance when you're making a statement when you give an argument. So the next natural thing, and we know that this is the basis of doing history, is we need evidence. We need to be able to validate the specific argument that we have made with evidence. Okay. And your evidence in a significance question comes from your contextual knowledge. It comes from our use of statistics, our use of key people as illustrating our point of events, of dates, of developments. We need specific factual detail and contextual understanding as evidence. Once we've done that, we need to develop our argument in the form of an explanation. Okay, so we can use language like this shows that, this highlights, this illustrates, this suggests. That's how we bring out the best form of explanation. And we're just trying to develop the argument that we made at the beginning of the paragraph. So we need to explain. Your argument is not self explanatory. If you make an argument, you've got to kind of defend it. You've got to explain why it is a valid argument. And then, last but not least, and sometimes in a paragraph, you might not always need to do this, but I think it's always a good idea to have a judgment just to close your paragraph off. So you can use type of language like therefore, evidently, consequently, this shows that. This is effectively your mic drop. Okay, your judgment is a reaffirmation of your argument. You are saying your argument in a new but more concise and perhaps more lyrical way that just reaffirms the strength of your argument. It's clear, it's punchy, and it makes your original argument stand out even more. Okay, so that's how we should be structuring our writing in history at paragraph level. So let's talk about how we level up on this question, how we get the best out of our efforts here. We know that the Migration, Empire and People course, shortened to MEP here, is centered around the analysis of 2000 or 1000 years of history, looking at this history of migration, empire, and people through these 7 key factors. So we've got identity, business, survival, migration, liberty, and empire. And so, in order to level up on this question, in your answer, you want to try and use at least one of these factors in each paragraph to explain the significance of the person, the development, or the event. So you want to talk about why this person or this event is significant in the context of one of these factors that we use in the course. Okay, so let's look at this answer in action. I'm going to show you an example from a student who answer this particular question about the significance of the 100 Years' War in a GCSE exam a few years ago. So you're going to read the answer. You can pause it as you need to. Use the mark scheme over here to justify the reason for your mark. And then I want you to write this comment, write your answer about how many marks you think this student got in a comment to your teacher on this assignment on Google Classroom. So let's quickly run through the mark scheme. 1 to 2 marks is just basic knowledge, but even at this level, your understanding has to be relevant to the question. So you have to be talking about historical significance. 3 to 4 marks if you've got a simple explanation of one aspect of significance. 4 to 6 marks for a developed explanation of 2 or more aspects of significance. So that's why I've emphasized that you have to do 2 different paragraphs that explain at least two different aspects of the significance of this person, event, or development. And then 7 to 8 marks, which we're all aiming for, is a complex explanation of aspects of significance. Okay, so you're going to read this answer. What do you think this answer got out of 8? I'll read it out. The 100 Years' War, which actually went on for 116 years, started when Edward, King of England, changed the English coat of arms and claimed himself to the King of both England and France. This angered the French king immensely, which began the 100 Years' War. The 100 Years' War consisted of many different wars between the French and the English in different places. Overall, the French won, but they were in a lot of debt. The English were extremely embarrassed because of their loss. This was significant because it signified the beginning of the hostility between France and England. So think about the question here. Explain the significance of the 100 Years' War. Where do you think the student has best answered this question? Which parts of this answer do you think are the strongest? And what mark do you think the student got out of 8? Write that in a comment to your teacher on this assignment. So, as you hopefully saw, that wasn't a great answer because actually it didn't answer the question until the very last sentence. All that first part was great. It has lots of contextual knowledge about the 100 Years' War, but none of this is actually answering the question about the significance of the 100 Years' War. So let's make sure we don't fall into that trap and that we are focused on answering the question, not just saying everything we know about the topic or the person in the question. So let's read a better answer. Okay, I'm going to pause it here and I want you to read it out to yourself. And then I'm going to talk through what went well. So we've got some success criteria here that I think are the makings of a really good significance question. We've got an argument addressing the question at the beginning of the paragraph. We can see that clearly here. If the question is explain the significance of Alfred the Great, the question immediately is addressed in the argument. Alfred the Great is significant, because he heroically defeated the Danes who threatened England's survival. That's an argument that addresses the question, but please make sure you write the word significance in there. We've got lots of specific contextual knowledge. We've got statistics, people, event, dates, developments, and we have used this here as evidence to validate our argument that Alfred the Great heroically defended the Vikings who threatened England's survival. And notice how we've got the theme of survival here too. We've got some explanation using that key phrase. This shows that Alfred is significant because and then this basically counts as our paragraph on Alfred's short-term significance. So the reason why he is remarked upon. I would make this better by using that language of the 4 R's. Alfred the Great is significant because he heroically defeated the Viking Danes. This was remarkable because the Danes threatened England's survival. So use one of the 4 R's in your answer. And then we have another paragraph here explaining Alfred's long-term significance. So what mark do you think this would have got? Needless to say, it's a much better answer than the previous example. So over to you. You are now going to attempt your own significance question. And so we've given you a new question that we want you to think very deeply about. Spend as much time as you need to planning it out first. Your question is, explain the significance of the loss of the American colonies. So we want you to think about the significance of this really important turning point when the American colonies successfully defeated Britain and became an independent republic. Now, you need to think about the 4 R's in relation to the loss of the American colonies. So, why was it remarkable? Why is it remembered? What kind of change did it result in? And why? Go back to my 4 R's. I've forgotten one of them now. What does it reveal? Okay, does it reveal a bigger issue or a bigger theme from the past? Okay, so this needs to be uploaded to the assignment tab. Ideally, try and do it, plan it out, and then try and do it in timed conditions where possible. But make sure you have the 2 key features of a paragraph on short-term significance, a paragraph on long-term significance. Okay, if there's anything that's unclear, please message back on this assignment. Thank you. Good luck.